Good morning, honorable members. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praises shall continually be in my mouth. As we begin our devotions this morning with our Moments of Impact segment, I want to share briefly on this subject, maximizing your season. One of the most invaluable lessons of life I've learned over the years is that God created life to operate in seasons. When God created the earth, He created it to function in seasons. Genesis chapter 8, verse 22 says, while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Even the human body was designed to function in seasons. We came into this world as infants, grow into child and then adolescence, and then adulthood, and then as a senior citizen. Each of these stages of life only lasts for a season. Understanding that life operates in seasons is very important because it prevents frustrations and disappointments. It's amazing how so many people are frustrated and disappointed with their life today because they refuse to embrace the truth that life operates in seasons. Some people want to relive the past and shun the reality of the present. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 says, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens. Let me reiterate, everything connected to us is seasonal. The truth of the matter is, the seat you're sitting in today, you might not be sitting in it 5 years from now. This is why it's important to maximize your season and make the most of your time, because the only thing that is constant in life is change. In conclusion, I want to leave you with a passage of scripture found in John chapter 9, verses 1 to 4. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered in verse 3 and said, neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. Verse 4, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, for the night cometh when no man can work. I say to each of us today, work while it is day, because it's not if night is coming, it's when. Selah, think and act on these things. Bow your hearts with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We ask you for your continued guidance and your protection over our lives. We pray that you would help us to maximize our season and make the best use of our time here on this earth. Now, Father, today you said, ask and it shall be given. Seek and we shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. We pray today, Lord, for peace in our nation. We pray for your divine intervention in our land. The problem we are facing, Almighty God, is bigger than us. But, oh Lord, our eyes are upon you. Father, we pray that you would rid our streets of crime and violence. May you remove anger, hatred, and bitterness out of the hearts of our citizens and turn their hearts towards you. Father, I pray today for our law enforcement agencies and our policy makers this morning. May you grant them godly wisdom and strength as they seek to implement strategies to curb the rise of crime in our nation. We pray for divine intel and insight from heaven that will aid us in bringing change and transformation to our nation. Father, we put the Bahamas in your hands. Please, oh Lord, don't leave us, neither forsake us. We humbly ask that you would show yourself strong on our behalf. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let us repeat the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, members. At our last sitting, we were at statement and communication by ministers. I am allowing this morning for us to go back to laying of documents by ministers. I presume we are now ready. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. No.
I rise to lay on the table House copy of the following: the National Investment Funds Act 2022 appointed date notice.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you.
Madam Speaker,
Order that the document do lie on the table. For the lay,
I'm about to lay also the fiscal strategy report and the medium-term debt management strategy report, but I wish to make a few remarks in respect to it as I do lay them. Madam Speaker, it does give me great pleasure to rise in this honorable House in my capacity as the Minister of Finance, to table two of the most significant policy documents in the government's fiscal calendar. That is the 2022 Fiscal Strategy Report and the Medium-Term Debt Management Strategy. Together, these documents articulate the specific policies and strategies of this administration, which are restoring the country's fiscal health as promised in the speech from his own, and the blueprint for change outlining our agenda. Madam Speaker, I would like to begin my communication with an overview of the 2022 Fiscal Strategy Report. This report outlines the government's plans to achieve specific fiscal targets. These targets include an improvement in government revenue yield to more than 24% of GDP by fiscal year 2024-2025, a measured reduction in government expenditures to less than 23% of GDP by fiscal year 2024 and 2025. As a result of these measures, achievement of a budget surplus by fiscal year 2024-2025. Madam Speaker, in accordance with the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2018, the Fiscal Strategy Report is to be tabled in Parliament on the third Wednesday of November of each year. While in opposition, and since coming to office as the government, we have articulated on multiple occasions the fundamental flaws in the FRA, Financial Fiscal Responsibility Act, including this very same timetable. During the fiscal year 2022-2023, the Fiscal Responsibility Act would have required government to table its fiscal strategy report in Parliament on the 16th of November 2022. This date, Madam Speaker, was simply not feasible. For at this time, the Bahamas was in the middle of its Standards & Poor's biannual credit rating review. Tabling such a document would have interfered with the independent review process. I would like to point out to this honorable House that the results of the S&P Standard & Poor's review were not released until the 22nd of November 2022. This event was very significant for our country, for the first time in almost a decade, positive signs were observed in the Bahamas credit rating. While the S&P rating did not provide an improved credit rating for the Bahamas, it did provide an improvement in the credit outlook from negative to stable. I point this out to emphasize that this constitutes a reversal of the country's deteriorating credit position. Our plans to restore the country's fiscal health are working. Madam Speaker, given the significance of this report and its implications for the government's fiscal policies, projections, and debt sustainability, the 2022 Fiscal Strategy Report and Debt Management Strategy were deferred to allow for inclusion of this significant outcome in our projections, policies, and strategies. In tandem with the most recent Fiscal Strategy Report is the release of the updated medium-term debt management strategy. This document also benefits from the country's rebounding credit profile, which is reflected in factors such as interest rates, access to financing, and the overall financing plan. As a result of this analysis, the general outlook is that the fiscal plans implemented by this administration since coming to office are already bearing fruit. As a result, the public can expect, one, the achievement of a budget surplus by financial year 2024-2025, and a decline in the debt to GDP ratio to at least 67.1% by the financial year of 2026-2027. Madam Speaker, the comments that I make today about our nation's fiscal health echo those of reputable international financial institutions and economists who have performed advanced reviews of our draft documents. It is widely believed that the most recent FSR is the most comprehensive and clearly articulated strategy the country has ever produced. And these are not just technical achievements. They represent real progress for the Bahamas, progress that Bahamians are going to feel. Progress on our fiscal goals supports our efforts to build a diversified economy, one that will generate more inclusive opportunities and prosperity. Progress on fiscal goals means progress for people. Madam Speaker, we have always been clear-eyed about the scale of the challenges we face, but also confident that we have what it takes to chart a new course forward. May God bless us and speed us on our way. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the documents be brought up.
Madam Speaker, the 2022 Fiscal Strategy Report and the medium-term debt management strategy. Thank you. You just put it in. Anyone else? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Order that the documents you lie on the table. The chair recognizes for the tabling of documents.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Public Service Commission Foreign Service Orders, Amendments, Regulations 2023.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. For the laying of documents. Thank you, Honourable Member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marcos City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. By way of you to the member for Cat Island, Rum-Kings, and Salvador, as we know, in law, the report ought to have been laid at the dates mentioned by the member for Cat Island. And he has explained the rationale as to why it was not laid. There's another component of that law that also requires that it is debated in the House. And so by way of you, I would like to know what date is the government intending for the entire House to debate the fiscal strategy report as required by law.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West.
Madam Speaker, we are aware that a debate must be forthcoming, and there will be, but we will advise of the date.
Thank you, honorable member. Statement and communication by minister.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. I just want to get a sense from the leader in terms of time period that it's likely to occur.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael. Members, honorable members, Madam Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You may proceed, honorable
Speaker, by thanking the Almighty God for allowing me once again the opportunity to stand in this honorable place on behalf of the wonderful people of Carmichael and Bahamians everywhere. Madam Speaker, on the 18th of January 2023, I provided an update to this honorable House concerning our government's unwavering commitment to protect our borders and enforce the lawful processes for entry into the Bahamas. During my last communication, I stated that I know and fully accept that we will be measured by our work, our results, and not our speeches. I further stated that the Department of Immigration is committed to doing the work needed to deliver the results that the Bahamian people demand. Madam Speaker, our work to address this pressing issue did not commence with my communication, nor did it commence with the many false articles and stories authored by fringe groupings. No, Madam Speaker, this work began on day one. This is why, Madam Speaker, within months of coming into office, this administration, led by the Honorable Philip Brave Davis, uplifted the spirits of a demoralized and broken immigration department by immediately remedying the long outstanding confirmations and promotions of officers in various ranks, which were left outstanding by the former administration from as far back as 2014. I might add, Madam Speaker, this directly impacted more than 250 immigration officers, or more than 30% of the Human Resource Department of the Bahamas Immigration. This is why, Madam Speaker, this administration immediately recruited and commissioned the largest immigration squad in the history of the Department of Immigration, increasing the number of immigration officers by more than 30%. This is why, Madam Speaker, in 2014, the Progressive Liberal Party government made the single largest investment in the history of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, with an injection of over $200 million to upgrade the Defense Force through the Sandy Bottom Project. We bought a whole new fleet of vessels, Madam Speaker, including His Majesty's Bahamian ship, the Lawrence Major, the first roll-on, roll-off vessel of its class acquired by the organization. This is why, Madam Speaker, this administration, in anticipation of present circumstances, established a temporary holding facility in Inagua with the capacity to hold over 800 persons. This is to reduce the time required for irregular migrants intercepted in the southern Bahamas to be returned to their home countries. Madam Speaker, whilst many continue to talk without sound action, and some protest without sound action, the public can rest assured that this Davis-led administration is working diligently, efficiently, and consistently to implement viable policies and protocols to address these immigration challenges. Madam Speaker, today I am pleased to share with this Honorable House and the public some of the actions taken by the government and its agencies since the 18th of January. You will recall, Madam Speaker, that on the 18th of January, I warned persons that any undocumented migrants will be taken into custody. This extended to persons working without a valid work permit or working outside the scope of their work permit. This warning, Madam Speaker, further extended to persons who entered the country as a visitor and illegally engaged in employment and/or unlawful activities. Madam Speaker, just a day later, on the 19th of January, the Immigration Enforcement Unit conducted operations to infiltrate a number of dancing clubs. Investigations indicate that some of these clubs illegally employ persons who enter the country as a visitor and also overstay the time granted by immigration to remain in the country. In one operation, Madam Speaker, 4 Jamaican females calling themselves the Mango Season Girls was taken into custody for working illegally and overstaying. They were charged and placed before the court, convicted, sentenced, deported, and placed on the restricted list. On the 20th of January, Madam Speaker, a joint operation by immigration and the police in the eastern area resulted in the apprehension of a number of irregular migrants, one of whom was found in possession of a fraudulent work permit. Madam Speaker, just a matter of days after my last address, a vessel carrying 396 irregular migrants from Haiti were intercepted by the United States Coast Guard in the vicinity of Kisal Bank. In accordance with our plans, Madam Speaker, to address an increase in interceptions, the Coast Guard was directed to transport the intercepted migrants to the temporary facility at Inagua, where 375 migrants were handed over to Bahamian officials on the 24th of January, 2023. Some 21 migrants, mainly minors, remained in the custody of the U.S. Coast Guard. Madam Speaker, I wish to pause just for a moment because even up to this morning, some very significant and wretched information came to my attention, some of which I will share with this honorable chamber and of course the public. Madam Speaker, in that voyage were some 55 minor children, the largest number of minor children ever in the history of all of these treacherous voyages. Additionally, Madam Speaker, I want to pause to just highly commend the United States Coast Guard for their intuition, for their high skill, and for the job that they continue to do with us to assist us. It is impossible, Madam Speaker, for us, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and our law enforcement agencies, to police our waters, 100,000 square miles of water. And so there is a collaborative effort to ensure that we stop all of these irregular migrant vessels. And I want to, Madam Speaker, I want to ask praying members of this Bahamian society to continue to pray for all of our officers in law enforcement. I say that, Madam Speaker, because having looked through the thread of emails and the information garnered this morning, the United States Coast Guard averted a disaster at sea. Madam Speaker, I can say that in the 80s and 90s when I was on the Royal Bahamas Police Force, I would have had to be part of teams where these vessels, they would have sank, and we would have had to assist the Defense Force with recovering the bodies from the sea bottom. And Madam Speaker, this in itself indicates the grave nature that Haiti is finding itself in. And all of us, as right-thinking Bahamians, all of us, as part of this Caribbean nation, must put our heads together to determine how we're going to address the situation in Haiti. Yes. Madam Speaker, in that respect, I'll make 2 quick points. Firstly, when we talk about these vessels, and everyone would have seen the pictures on social media, you'd have seen the 396 persons on that vessel. As the Coast Guard vessel approached that vessel, they saw an individual in the water that was rescued. And when they rescued him and questioned him, he indicated that he had fallen from that vessel. And Madam Speaker, the trend has been, whenever these vessels are being approached by law enforcement, whether it's the Coast Guard or the Defense Force, all of the migrants on board usually shift to one side of the vessel. And so it isn't about just going and intercepting a vessel, as the Minister of National Security will tell you. When they spot these vessels, they have to use the highest degree of skill to approach. Otherwise, you will have a disaster at sea. And Madam Speaker, from the information that I've received, I can say, and I wish to commend again the U.S. Coast Guard for avoiding a major disaster at sea. Secondly, Madam Speaker, in that respect, I am happy that our Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Davis, is the head of CARICOM, and he is leading the charge in respect to ensuring that Haiti gets the necessary attention and that the problem is challenged, or the problem is addressed from a long-term standpoint. It cannot be a quick fix. And so, Madam Speaker, I am pleased to indicate that there is a whole lot that's going on, and I hope and pray that we're able to get to address the deep-seated problems that Haiti currently face. Madam Speaker, just a matter of days after my last address, I would have indicated this vessel that was intercepted with the 396 immigrants. Madam Speaker, with the activation of the temporary facility in Inagua, the government moved quickly to deploy additional resources to that facility. The Ministry of Health mobilized a team of nurses and physicians who flew to Inagua, where they erected a field hospital donated by the United States government. And I wish to commend the Minister of Health, and Madam Speaker, this is what we call leading by the front. The Minister of Health himself went down with his team to ensure that the reception, the screening, and to ensure that there was no issues as it relates to healthcare. And I wish to thank you, Minister Darville, for that. Food and other supplies were shipped by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force continue to assist the department in providing additional security on that island. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, the interception was not as isolated. That is the one at Kisal. On the 24th of January, a few days later, the Department of Immigration was notified that a vessel carrying unlawful entrance from the Republic of Haiti ran aground in the area of the Bluff, South Andros, and that it was taken on water. Officers from the Royal Bahamas Police Force stationed in Andros moved swiftly and apprehended a number of unlawful entrants to our shores. Combined with reinforcement teams from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the Bahamas Immigration Department, a total of 41 persons were taken into custody following a vigorous search of the area and the surrounding communities. 41 persons, Madam Speaker, were subsequently transported to the detention center here in the Providence. Madam Speaker, on the 30th of January 2023, immigration officials received notification of a suspected smuggling vessel sinking in the area of Grand Bahama. Law enforcement officials, Madam Speaker, quickly mobilized, and 19 individuals were taken into custody. These included 11 Haitian nationals, 2 Ecuadorians, and 2 Chinese nationals. Further, Madam Speaker, 4 Bahamian males suspected of being the organizers were arrested and are expected to be placed before the courts along with this group once the investigations are completed. Madam Speaker, yes, we are challenged, but yes, we are prepared. Yes, we are ready. And yes, with God's grace and mercy, we will ride this wave. Madam Speaker, in my earlier communication, I issued a stern warning and advised the Bahamian people that any and all unlawful entrants will be swiftly processed and repatriated to their homeland. Madam Speaker, just yesterday, 3 repatriation exercises were undertaken by the Bahamas Immigration Department in collaboration with our law enforcement partners, where a total of 251 persons were repatriated. Madam Speaker, while the concentration is on the Haitians, the same vigor, Madam Speaker, goes towards the Cuban nationals. That group included 31 Cuban nationals and 220 Haitian nationals. Of this group, Madam Speaker, I should note that 130 of those persons repatriated were a part of the group that were intercepted last week, that is the 396 persons. Madam Speaker, I can further report that as I speak at this moment, the remaining 245 migrants are being flown to their homeland. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, I just got a WhatsApp to say that the first Bahamas Air flight took off with 132 migrants en route to Haiti. Madam Speaker, all this was done through a collaborative effort of our law enforcement partners, and I might add, Honorable Speaker, honorable members, Bahamians, all of this was done without incident. Without incident, Madam Speaker. And so we have to commend our law enforcement partners. And I might add, Madam Speaker, we are a Christian nation. The migrants were treated with basic dignity, basic human dignity, and Christian decency, care, and respect. On behalf of an appreciative government and people, I thank each of the heads of the law enforcement agency as they continue to protect this great nation. Madam Speaker, in addition to our efforts to repatriate economic migrants, on Friday, the 27th of January, the department announced significant changes to review and process applications from the Republic of Haiti. The change in position followed an announcement from the Honorable Prime Minister of the immediate involuntary departure from Haiti of all Bahamian diplomatic personnel. With the closure of our embassy, Madam Speaker, the Department of Immigration is no longer able to use the services of our embassy in Haiti to assist the department with enhanced verification or due diligence as required. This required, Madam Speaker, the introduction of new policies and procedures which are presently being considered. Consequently, as at the 27th of January, existing and new permits to reside applications from Haitian citizens will only be considered on a case-by-case basis, and approvals will only be granted in the most exceptional circumstances. Secondly, no new work permit applications for Haitian citizens will be processed until such time as revised protocols are introduced to verify and authenticate documents issued by the Haitian government and the Haitian National Police. Thirdly, all existing work permit applications and renewals for work permits will be subjected to the most vigorous review and scrutiny. Applicants should note that as a consequence, the time frame for processing and determination of such applicants will be impacted. Madam Speaker, a number of persons have suggested that the actions taken by the government of the Bahamas unfairly targets Haitian citizens. Let me assure everyone that this is not the case. The policies being introduced are not designed to discriminate against any national group, but rather to address legitimate concerns regarding the documents released by the Haitian government having regard to the actions of the Haitian National Police and the departure from office of Haiti's last remaining senators. In light of these circumstances, Madam Speaker, at this time, the department is not able to have full confidence in character or other certificates issued by that country. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas maintains a strict regulatory framework for the review and processing of all immigration applications. This is the only process by which persons are permitted to enter the Bahamas. This administration, led by the Honorable Philip Grave Davis, is resolute in its commitment to protect the territorial sovereignty of the Bahamas. During my last communication, I spoke to the dangers of misinformation and untruths being spread via social media and other outlets. I have sought to outline as clear as I can the government's immigration policies and what we have done to address the challenges. I have outlined how the protests based on an imaginary immigration bill was untrue, of how the protests based on the imaginary shantytown on Paradise Island was untrue, and now today, here we are. Madam Speaker, there are no hidden deals. There are no surprises. There is no conspiracy. When I look around this chamber, on both sides, I see persons who love this country and want the best for it. No member from this side, and I am not aware of any members opposite, proposing or seeking to promote any policy which will erode the sovereignty or integrity of this country. This nonsense being spread by persons who do not appear to be familiar with the truth is just that, nonsense. I look at my colleagues, the member for Angliston, for instance, the daughter of an architect of Bahamianization and one of the most fierce defenders of Bahamianization in her own right. I see the honorable member for Fox Hill, who constantly fights for and advocates for a more independent Bahamas, an adoption of fully Bahamian institutions and symbols. I see the honorable Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, a man whose love for this country is such that he defends our sovereignty on every single day, from calling for urgent action on climate change to highlighting the urgent need for a regional response to the issues facing Haiti. And there are others. A cabinet, a government committed to the advancement and protection of the Bahamas for Bahamians. Madam Speaker, in this democratic society, we believe that persons have a qualified right to assemble and peacefully protest. Certainly, protests are often necessary. To the protesters and their calls for action, ours is an open government. We are always open to listen. Indeed, at a previous protest, I received a proposal which was reviewed and considered. I would ask everyone to ensure that whilst we face these challenges, let sanity prevail. We are a country of laws, Madam Speaker, and the maintenance of law and order must remain a cornerstone of our country. Xenophobia has no place in the Bahamas, nor does the arbitrary harassment of any person on the basis of any perception as to their nationality. To those doing it, stop. Madam Speaker, the government of the Bahamas is resolute. Our immigration laws will be enforced and violators will be returned to their home countries. If you are here illegally, living in New Providence, Abaco, Harbor Island, Grand Bahama, or anywhere else, you must leave. You must immediately wind up your affairs and leave the Bahamas voluntarily. Failure to do so, as I've said before, will result in you being arrested, prosecuted, deported, and placed on the restricted list. This applies to anyone in this country living illegally, not just the Haitian immigrants. Whether you're from the north, the south, the east, or the west, if you have no lawful basis for being in this country, you must leave. Madam Speaker, I close by thanking the team at the Department of Immigration, our police and defense force, the Ministry of National Security, and our international partners for all their work they do in protecting our borders and enforcing our immigration laws and policies. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas maintains an organized system to allow for the lawful entry and orderly processing of applications for lawful entry into the Bahamas. This is the only process by which persons should enter the country. Madam Speaker, may God continue to bless and preserve and keep the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the communication be brought up. Order that the document lie on the table. For the statement and communication?
Just for information to members of this honorable House in response to a considerable number of phone calls I received reference to a video that went viral yesterday on social media that featured a 8-year-old boy in rage and anger and use of foul language. For the information of this House, that video was purposely recorded in May of 2021. And it was done for a particular reason, Madam Speaker, which remains confidential. The boy, now 10 years old, is in the care of the state and receives the necessary attention that's required. I wish to inform the House that we are investigating the release of the video, the how, and the why. Madam Speaker, but for the record, that was recorded in May of 2021, and the young man is receiving the due care and attention from Social Services and from the Ministry of Health.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Disgrace. Further statement in commission? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
Thank you very much. I think it would be beneficial if Ministry of Social Services would consider issuing a statement to that effect, because a number of members of the public were first shocked and emotionally at pain seeing that video, thinking that it was an indication of society in the Bahamas today, but more importantly that the child is receiving the proper attention. That I think was the second thought. It would be beneficial to the public for them to be advised that he is in care and being treated.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Further laying, further statement and communication by ministers. Thank you, Honorable Member. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Tall Pines.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to join with the Minister, Keith Bell, the Minister of National Security, and to also say that during my visit in Inagua, I was pleasantly surprised to see how professional the services were executed as the immigrants left the U.S. cutter, and the degree of compassion that was demonstrated by the various officers, particularly with the children and many of the females who were on board that vessel. And then to see the structured system that was in place with the movement of those immigrants to the Defense Force base and the care that was provided, I must give them a round of applause, because it's very important to execute these type of operations, taking into consideration the degree of stress with the individuals who came off the ship. And I'm also pleased to say that the Ministry of Immigration and Labor clearly demonstrated that they are prepared for these type of operations. They had the various different interpreters, many who are trained immigration officers, as well as those trained in first aid, who were able to resolve many of the problems before the medical surveillance team landed on the island. So congratulations to you, Minister, as well as Minister Monroe, on a job well done. And I believe that after years of going through the same thing over and over, I believe that we are getting things right. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning. Should I say? Should I say? She said first. She said first.
Madam Speaker, just for the record, we are beyond the first reading. We're into the second reading of the bill, Madam Speaker.
Yeah. I call for first reading.
Yes, she did.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Second reading in committee of affairs.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning. Once again. As we begin the 2023 year, I must pause to give God thanks for his goodness and mercies. And I do consider myself blessed to be here today in good health and in a sound mind after recuperating from COVID-19, and to be here to represent the good people of Tall Pines who are counting on me to address their concerns in this honorable place. I am grateful for their ongoing support and want to assure them that I remain committed to good representation while addressing their concerns both at the constituency level and at the national level. Madam Speaker, in September last year, our administration marked 1 year in office, and I am pleased to report that despite the challenges we faced as a government, I believe we accomplished many of our goals and objectives outlined in our Blueprint for Change during our first year in office, particularly in the area of social services. And I want to commend the Minister of Social Services for many innovative programs that have been implemented to reach out to those who are in need and to assist the poor. We also did a relatively good job with training and job creation. The Bahamian people can rest assured that we will continue to address issues affecting the poor, improvement of both primary and tertiary healthcare services throughout our country. And yes, I must commend the team at the Ministry of Finance for their laser-focused approach on rebuilding our local economy. That is why, Madam Speaker, I don't listen to the noise or the naysayers. Instead, I just roll up my sleeves and keep working to get the job done.
Amen.
So as we press on in our second year in office as a unified team, led by the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, and I wish to take this opportunity to thank the great people of Tall Pines once again, and by extension, the entire Bahamas for their support and patience with us as a government in 2022. I remain confident that as a government, we are on the right track for fulfilling our transformative agenda and to bring meaningful change, to bring relief to those suffering in our country. Madam Speaker, let me assure the Bahamian people that our Prime Minister is committed to transforming lives. And I stand in solidarity with every cabinet minister as we put our pedal to the metal to accelerate all programs under our portfolios in collaboration with the relevant stakeholders, both in the public and private sectors. Madam Speaker, as I have stated many times before in this honorable House, as Minister of Health and Wellness, I am mandated to improve healthcare services, promote health and wellness, and to ensure that quality health services are accessible to all persons. And we are working daily across our country to achieve this noble goal. One thing I know for sure, Madam Speaker, is that this could not successfully be carried out, and I would not be able to achieve my mandate without the diligent and competent nurses and midwives who work throughout our country. So nurses, I encourage you to continue to strive for the spirit of excellence, caring, and innovation that save lives. We are all grateful for your support, your hard work, and commitment in delivering essential healthcare services across our beautiful chain of islands. Madam Speaker, last year, I laid the Mental Health Bill 2022 in this honorable House, and it was later unanimously passed in both chambers. I want to thank everyone for their support. Today, I am pleased to report that the Mental Health Bill 2022 is finally enacted, and we are preparing to bring it into force in stages in short order.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank our Director of Nursing because since that time, 41 nurses are now in postgraduate training programs to become mental health experts in their own right. Last year, I laid in this honorable house the new Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022 for further consultation. And today I'm privileged to stand on my feet to move this progressive piece of legislation that seeks to repeal and replace the current Nurses and Midwives Act 1971. Madam Speaker, it's a new day for nurses throughout our country who have been advocating for change in the way nursing is practiced across our archipelago. So with your leave, Madam Speaker, I would like to take a few minutes to acknowledge some of our nurses in the gallery this morning who are here to support me as minister and who have labored in the vineyard for years and eagerly await this bill to be passed unanimously, enacted, and brought into force. Honorable members, please join me and give these hard-working nurses, our senior nurses, current nurses in the council, and members a round of applause. I'd also like to say on behalf of the Bahamian people and all of us who provide healthcare services on a daily basis throughout this country, I say thank you for your hard work and labor of love. Madam Speaker, as an honorable member in this chamber, I'd like to give credit where credit is due and thank all past ministers of health for their contribution to this bill, but specifically Dr. Dwayne Sands for his technical insight during his tenure as minister, as well as the former Prime Minister, the Honorable Hubert Minnis, for his involvement while he served as Prime Minister and as Minister of Health. I would also like to thank my team at the Ministry of Health, the Attorney General, Senator Orion Pinder, and his team for their valuable input and guidance as they drafted this piece of legislation. Madam Speaker, in a nutshell, and I don't intend to be long today because this is something that has been on the table for a long time and it's time to pass this bill. In a nutshell, this progressive piece of legislation seeks to expand the practice of nursing and midwifery, continue the work of the Nursing Council of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Registrar, the Nursing Tribunal, provide the training, regulation, registration, enrollment, licensing necessary for continued professional development of nurses and midwives. Just as it was recognized in 1971 that the Act of 1926 needed to be upgraded to accommodate the evolution of the nursing profession, we understand the importance of further modernization of legislative framework for the oversight of the nursing profession with the repeal and replacement of the Nurses Midwives Act 1971, some 52 years later, and here today, we are debating the Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022. Madam Speaker, the shocking events of 2019 and 2020 have highlighted the reality of the roles and skills and capabilities of nurses and midwives, particularly during time of emergency and disaster. Since 1971, the diverse proficiencies possessed by competent nurses validate the need to give credit where credit is due and have this legislation reflect those changes. And so as we pick up this piece of legislation, for those who still express interest, this is a very in-depth piece of legislation that will transform the way nursing is practiced throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and to ensure that proficiency as well as ability is always at a higher standard in the healthcare professions. Madam Speaker, in a World Health Organization report entitled The State of the World's Nursing 2022, the WHO director, Dr. Tedros, said, and I quote, "Nurses are the backbone of any health system. Today, many nurses find themselves in the front line in the battle against COVID-19, some who have even lost their lives. With that being stated, we admonish readers to recognize that nurses should get the support they need to keep the world healthy. This new Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022 is a clear demonstration of this administration's support for nurses throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We must be mindful that nurses complete a rigorous training program and undergo theoretical and practical assessment so that they reach the level of proficiency to practice in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. They have therefore earned a right to expand their scope of practice, and we are committed as a government to make it happen for them. I fully support this piece of legislation, which is reflective of what is happening throughout the region and by extension in every Commonwealth country. Mr. Speaker, the International Council of Nurses, which represents some 20 million nurses worldwide, defines the term nursing as not only indicating the promotion of health, prevention of illness, and the provision of cares for individuals who are sick, well, or disabled, dying, but it also encompasses advocacy, research, participation in shaping health policy and system management, promoting safe environments, and engaging in continued education for the advancement of the nursing professions. Nurses can work autonomously, collaboratively, in various settings with individuals, their families, groups, and in communities. And this is demonstrated in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on a daily basis. Madam Speaker, we must remember that nursing had its origin in the 18th and 19th centuries, at a time when it was viewed as a caretaking job that was task-driven, with little or no formal training being a part of it. Thankfully, the nursing profession has evolved over the years into a most noble and necessary profession. And everyone in here, somewhere along the line, have had care as a result of nursing in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. In the mid-19th century, Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp, who has been said to be the founder of nursing, even in her time, and it's documented, that Nightingale knew that informed education and science-based knowledge could help patients even more. She and her team were able to save many lives during the British War. She also advocated for nursing receiving advanced education while administering basic nursing practices. Madam Speaker, today, we must be mindful of the fact that the practice of nursing is founded on knowledge theories and are evidence-based and aimed at assessing and caring for patients and promoting optimal wellness, something that we need to focus in our country on at this particular time. Yes. And I want to say that next week I intend to bring a communication that speaks specifically about the STEPS survey, which clearly demonstrate where we are as a nation with our health. Yes. Madam Speaker, in the Bahamas, formal nursing training started in 1889, when trained nurse was recruited from Britain to train nurses in the Bahamas to work at our hospital. The first class of 12 students started training in 1903, with only 4 of them females graduating after 3 years. In 1959, nursing education in the Bahamas was changed to follow the British Parliamentary Training School model, consisting of a 4-year program inclusive of 1 year of midwifery. From 1964, once students graduated from the Bahamas Parliamentary Training School, they had an option to go to Britain for 1 year for another year of training, which allowed them to be registered with the General Nursing Council of England and Wales. In 1969, the British program was elevated to consider equivalency and credited by the General Nursing Council of England and Wales. As the program of nursing evolved, it was moved from the Ministry of Health into the College of the Bahamas, allowing it to be upgraded from a diploma to an academic degree. I am pleased to report in 2022, The nursing school and allied health professions at the University of the Bahamas produced over 100 graduates with a bachelor's of science degree in nursing at a critical time when there were major challenges in our healthcare system. I'm also pleased to state that we are about to take on an additional, I think, somewhere between 35 to 40 new nurses who just recently graduated from UB, and this is a step in the right direction. Additionally, there are 2 other colleges that have commenced bachelor's degree program in the Bahamas, mainly Southern College in New Providence and Tarif College in Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker, this bill is for the advancement. This bill is for the advancement of almost 1,700 nurses, 200 midwives across the public and private healthcare sectors that today are working in our clinics, our hospitals, throughout our communities, and throughout the Bahamas. This bill is also for nurses and midwives who came before and served in our communities. Many of them providing care and practice was notable, and they were ahead of their time. Madam Speaker, similar to the Mental Health Bill 2022, this Nurse and Midwives Bill 2022 has added terms, expanded clauses, and reasonings that are aimed at advancing, more adequately supporting 21st century nursing and midwife practice in the Bahamas. The primary focus of this bill is to bring a higher level of focus to the way that nursing is practiced in our country. It speaks specifically to the various categories of nursing and the need for continuous training, regulation, preservation, and standard of professionalism. Madam Speaker, this bill gives interpretation in terms such as licensed practical nurse, nurse intern, the new category of nurses known as advanced practice nurse, nurse practitioners, and other terms that are necessary in order to reference the role of the nurse in our modern society. It also gives in detail explaining practice of nursing, practice of midwifery, and the relevant competency scales and other roles and functions within each scope of practice. Madam Speaker, as with any good piece of legislation, one does not totally discard what was practiced or before without proper assessment and evaluation of its merit and effectiveness. In the 1971 Act, the Nursing Council body was established. It was a good thing. The council was given the power to control training, the practice of nurses, clinical nurses, midwives, registered nurses, midwives, and the enrollment of clinical nurses. In this Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022, this entirety remains, and the continuance of its function and duties of the registrar are vital to the nursing profession. The council is now changed to 11-member council appointed in consultation with the minister, and they develop codes of conduct of nursing personnel, set standards and monitoring systems in relation to qualification, education, training, the practice of nursing and midwifery, and establish and carry out the council policies. The exercise of this function by the council gives us assurance that once a nurse is licensed in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, we know that they have gone through a rigorous training program and are qualified to meet our high expectation and the care delivery that is essential for our loved ones. The council also determines continuing professional education development for nursing personnel. Very important, because all of us who graduate either as physicians or nurses, we reach a point where we go into practical training, but we need to go back in the classroom to be refreshed. And this particular requirement for the completion of continuing nursing education is now required for the profession in country, bringing the practice of nursing and its regulation as a profession in alignment with other healthcare profession and licensing requirements. I know that as physicians, we have to do a set of courses every time we go back to license. And it is very important because it puts you out of the clinical setting back into the classroom where you begin now to look at new treatments and to make sure that you remain current. The annual review of a license to practice nursing is also introduced to ensure the existing manpower resources are accurately tracked. That's very important for us. So when you go to renew your license, as minister, I can actually call the council and say how many licensed individuals we have in the country, and we can have an accurate amount. Because nurses come into the country and some nurses leave the country. And so on a yearly basis, we need to know where we are. And strategies to rectify gaps in the profession is absolutely necessary for us at the Ministry of Health. It is important to emphasize here that the continuing professional development is very important in any health profession because it ensures sustained proficiency and it enhances skills to safeguard our nursing environment to ensure that we have quality care delivery protocols in place. It also helps in the advancing careers as continuous ongoing training and learning helps to ensure that our nurses stay on the cutting edge in their professional growth. With the Nursing Council administrating and regulating these new requirements, our nurses can now be certain that when they sign with the council and they are approved from continuing medical professional development, they will receive quality knowledge and superior skills, something that is absolutely necessary. Madam Speaker, as I go through the nuts and bolts of the bill, which is very important for me as minister, Part 3 of the bill addresses the financial provision for the council, mainly funds, resources, bank accounts, audits, and budget estimates and annual reports. Very important, because as our nurses pay their dues, they want to make sure that the council have an exact account of how the resources are being spent, audited accounts. These mechanisms embedded in law assures that the collection of assigned funds will be used for the betterment of nursing in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, Part 4 of this particular bill lists the qualifications of the licensed practical nurse, registered nurse, and advanced practice nurse. A licensed practical nurse is qualified to be enrolled as such if the person holds a certificate from an approved institution. This is very important because early this year, we spoke about the establishment of the PHA Academy, which is a training institute where we intend now to address some of the deficiency in nursing by training clinical nurses in our program. And this particular new amendment to the Act will help us to achieve this goal and objective. A licensed practical nurse is qualified to be enrolled if they hold a certificate from an approved institution. A registered nurse must hold a Bachelor of Science degree from an approved institution. And I must say that the University of the Bahamas is one of the finest institutions for the training of nurses in the region. Fast as we train them, the developed world coming to get them. Yeah. And so it goes to show you the quality that we're producing in the Bahamas that is laid on the foundation that goes back to 1903. The advanced practice nurse must hold a master's degree or provide proof of advanced certification from an approved institution of having completed the requisite training to be registered as a nurse practitioner. I am so glad, nurses, that we have reached the point of the nurse practitioner, where our nurses now can lead the charge in our clinic to take a lot of the burden that exists to the clinician or the doctor. Many of our nurses, I stand here as a physician on the backs of nurses training me when I came in as a young doctor and begin to impart knowledge to me and to do it the right way. Can I have some water, please? Right. Yeah, oh, sorry. There's also the nurse anesthetist. There's also the clinical nurse specialist. There's also the midwife. and then all of the other nurses who have specialties in psychiatric care, nurses who have specialties in certain surgical procedures, those who are specialized nurses in dialysis, and the list goes on and on. We need to make provision for these subspecialties in nursing. At all levels, nurses must be fit to practice nursing in the Bahamas and meet the minimum standards set by the council. Having standardized qualifications for nursing in this bill, we ensure that the profession is not compromised. We need to make sure that we protect the gate, make sure the quality that is at our bedside meet a standard that is dictated by the council. It's not compromised because these qualifications have to be met in order to be registered and subsequently licensed by our council. In this way, our nurses can rest assured that they are working beside equally qualified counterparts while on the job. Madam Speaker, in the Bahamas under the current act, it is the function of the council and the registrar to enroll licensed practical nurses, registered midwives, registered nurses, advanced practice nurses, record unlicensed assistive personnel, and have provisions for the yearly licensing of persons practicing nursing and midwifery in the country. One of the lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic was that at the time, there may be the need for us to bring all hands on deck. It was seen in the pandemic, where our graduate nurses and our intern nurses had to step to the plate. This particular bill gives the authority and the council the ability to license these individuals on a temporary basis in order for us to address the crisis that we face. In such instances, the bill provides for granting a letter of authorization to practice with further criteria, stipulations, and safeguarded by the council. Madam Speaker, Part 5 of the bill addresses the terms and responsibility of the applicants, the registrar, and the council. Similarly, Part 6 of the bill addresses registration, licensing, compliance of nursing agencies operating by a registered nurse, the midwife or advanced practice nurse. These parts ensure the integrity of the profession because certain standards have to be met and maintained in the interest of the public and safety of Bahamians and within the best practices associated with the profession. Madam Speaker, when one is in business for caring, serving, to protect persons in their most vulnerable and unguarded state, with the expectation of accountability, dependency, and trust, this has to be highlighted. Part 7 of this bill highlights the professional responsibility. I want to say that. Part 7 of the bill highlights professional responsibility and conduct of the nurse intern, the licensed practical nurse, the registered nurse, the midwife, and the advanced practice nurse. Misconduct in the profession will not be tolerated. It will not be tolerated under this new legislation. You can't give bad services to our public. It's going to be addressed because nurses must be admonished to operate at the highest code of conduct. It is important that we continue to hold the profession hand and to ensure that professionalism is expected at all times. Yes. Medical training is a difficult thing. We are trained to function at the highest professionalism with the greatest stress.
Across the board.
Madam Speaker, it is the utmost important that nurses maintain their license and remain in good standing with the council. If you're not, you will not be able to practice medicine in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. There may be occasion when complaints, a statement of dissatisfaction or grievance, alleged misconduct, or professional misconduct is levied by a member to the public against individuals who are with the council. In such circumstances, the bill requires the registrar to notify the person of the nature of the complaint, requests a written explanation and representation of the complaint, thus commencing the process of investigation and further determination by the council. This bill gives patients rights. If you are mistreated by a healthcare professional providing nursing for you, you can deal with the council. Madam Speaker, the clients as well as nurses and midwives have rights. Our clients have rights and our midwives and nurses have rights. No party should be mistreated or engage in any acts of misconduct. The investigative process of the council should ensure that all concerns are fairly treated and matters are favorably resolved. Not curry favor, favorably resolved. However, it is noted that there are some instances where it's not black and white. At times, there are gray areas where we cannot make a decision with the council. Any person with a personal resentment by any decision of the council with a specified time frame, appeal can be done at the Nurses' Appeal Tribunal. So we have another check there. If the person is unsatisfied with what happened or the decision of the council, there's an appeal tribunal, and that appeal tribunal is an independent tribunal that would listen to the complaints of the individual. The Nurses and Midwives Act 1971 exhibits another example of health-related legislation that has spanned over more than half a century without modernization or adjustments to accommodate the movement of the times, an expression of the modernization of the profession. Madam Speaker, as mentioned earlier, this is the second piece of health legislation that I, as minister responsible for health and wellness, have been privileged to move in this honorable house. I can foreshadow that there are additional pieces of health legislation that I plan to bring to this honorable house before the end of this budget cycle. Yes. While improvements are being made on how healthcare services are delivered, enhanced, and expanded, how we are working to improve our health infrastructure, how I'm developing a single governance structure and integrated care, how we intend to improve on our urgent care facilities and keep the load of cases that are classified as primary from our tertiary healthcare system. I want to ensure the Bahamian people that reform is taking place at the Ministry of Health and Wellness. We are working on legislation. We are working on new regulations. We are strengthening policies and the practice of the way healthcare professionals function in this country. So as I conclude, Madam Speaker, I wish to highlight once more the importance of this new bill for the management and delivery of healthcare in our country. The profession of nursing is evolving, and it is critical that we keep pace with what is happening globally. After more than 50 years, it is safe to say that the repeal and replacement of the Nurses Midwife Act 1971 is long overdue. As the debate on this progressive bill continues, it is my hope that there will be meaningful and focused contributions. And we in healthcare are looking for another unanimous support to the nurses throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I encourage the passing of this new awaited piece of legislation, and we are pleased to enact and in putting into force the new Nurses Midwives Bill 2022. And I would like to thank all the nurses in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and ask this House for a moment of silence for all the nurses we lost in the pandemic in our time when we were in trouble. Thank you, colleagues. Finally, it gives me great pleasure to move this piece of legislation and to allow our nurses to begin to operate effectively in the 21st century. Thank you.
Well done. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Gates.
Madam Speaker, before I start, I would like to wish happy birthday greetings to Ms. Brenda Knowles, who is a good constituent of my colleague from Port Charlotte, a friend and a mentor. I also would like to give a happy birthday to our colleague, Senator Michael Halkitis, as well. Madam Speaker, I'd like to give commendation to our Minister of Immigration and Labor and all of the public service agencies, such as the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, assisted by the Police Force, Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of Health, and even the general public for the support and encouragement as the diligent work of our immigration department is being done to protect our borders across the archipelago, and to ensure that we have, as the minister would have noted, apprehensions without incidences, safe apprehensions, to ensure that we are battling this issue consistently of irregular migrants. That's global, that's a global issue, but more importantly, based on what's happening in our region. I want to ask that we continue to pray for our brothers and sisters who are so adamant of leaving to go to where they think is a better place, but of course to also pray for our immigration leaders, the staff, the armed forces of our nation who work on the front lines to protect our borders. Madam Speaker, I stand today in support of the Nurses and Midwives Bill, which will modernize standards for nurses working in the Bahamas and elevate local nursing to the highest standards. It has been an auspicious start to 2023, Madam Speaker, and at Public Service, we held our annual symposium to start the year and launch our 2023 agenda focused on digitalization and modernization. Over the holidays, I enjoyed a very good Christmas with the people of Golden Gates, and it was an exceptional Christmas for public servants who received double incremental increases to their salaries, and many of them have messaged and called and said what a great Christmas they had as a result. In 2023, we're prepared for another great year of great labor relations and even more progress in the Golden Gates constituency and, of course, at the Ministry of Public Service. Now, today, we are here to bring this bill forward in honor of our nurses. It's been a long time coming, Madam Speaker. Nurses in the Bahamas desperately needed this bill to become law, and we are here to deliver for them today. And I commend the Honorable Member for Tall Pines in leading this important bill to completion. And as he has noted, we have consulted widely with stakeholders throughout the nation to ensure that we are able to meet the needs of modern nursing practitioners and midwives. Before addressing the specifics of this bill, I want to take a moment to speak to the whole picture in regards to healthcare and how this bill fits into the wider context, Madam Speaker. It's no secret that public healthcare in the Bahamas is experiencing a crisis. As the Prime Minister said a few days ago, it has been a crisis for many years. Successive administrations have talked about making improvements and even attempted to make major changes, but somehow these efforts always seem to fall short of the expectations and needs of the Bahamian public. As the Prime Minister has demonstrated, the Davis administration is not shying away from this challenge. We understand the depth and breadth of this crisis. There are resource challenges, infrastructural needs, environmental concerns, a scarcity of supplies, and a shortage of human resources. The situation, Madam Speaker, is dire. But this crisis is about much more than resources, supplies, or new buildings. Lives are on the line. Madam Speaker, people are being permanently impacted by these issues in the worst ways. You need only look at the stories emerging in social media and the news listen to the conversations being held by families throughout our communities to get a sense of the scale of this problem. As the government, people look to us to fix this situation. They don't simply want to hear us identify or analyze the crisis or show empathy for their pain. Each time, as a government, we speak to this matter, they have one question that they want answered. What is the government going to do about it? The answer to that question is, we're going to fix it. We have been taking steps to do just that. However, due to the scale and the scope of the immense difficulties we are facing within the healthcare system and the nation at large, that fix simply won't come overnight. It's not a quick fix, Madam Speaker, but the need is urgent after decades of failure within our system. This is not to downplay the skills and resourcefulness of our healthcare professionals within the public healthcare system, because for the most part, they've been absolutely doing their best with what they have to work with. Like everyone else, they would also like to see the resources and infrastructural needs of the healthcare system addressed, because it will enable them to be more effective at their jobs. The Davis administration has taken urgent action in this matter, and I can say with confidence that when this term is over, the Bahamian people will see real, transformative, positive change. Change that they can see, feel, touch within our healthcare system. And action has already been taken. Madam Speaker, in regards to quality of care, addressing human resource needs is pressing. The Davis administration has been working with the PHA and the Ministry of Health and Wellness to recruit and train more healthcare professionals and bring in needed roles, such as patient advocates, who can be direct liaisons between the patient and their care providers. Madam Speaker, allow me to mention all that we have done or are currently working on at the moment. A new wound and orthopedic care unit, improvements to the pediatric ward, upgrades and expansions at major government clinics, recruitment and training of a wide array of healthcare professionals, expansion of patient advocates, and last but not least, the construction of 2 hospitals, one on our 2 most populated islands, New Providence and Grand Bahama. With all of these improvements, we fully expect to transform the public health system for the better. The member for Tall Pines should be applauded for his leadership and tireless efforts to take the bull by the horns and fix what's ailing our healthcare system in a real way. I can guarantee the Bahamian people that at the end of all of these efforts, there will be drastic improvement in their experiences. These changes will no way erase the failures and pain of the past, but they will launch us into a brighter future for healthcare. Any objective observer on either side of the political aisle must acknowledge these efforts. In the meantime, the unfortunate consequence of past inaction is that until these major initiatives are complete, many of the familiar issues will remain with us for a while. Years of neglect cannot be fixed overnight. For those who continue to encounter issues within the system, we share your frustrations. We're frustrated too. Many of our family, friends, loved ones use these same healthcare facilities. People are tired of hearing about progress. They want to see and feel progress. I liken this situation to climbing out of a deep, dark hole. You won't really feel free until you emerge into the light. So as you climb, the progress made toward that eventual goal may seem meaningless. It may even go unnoticed because you're still in the hole. But with each inch that you ascend, you are that much closer to climbing out of the darkness. So I say to the Bahamian people, we are not out of the hole yet, but we are ascending. The bill we gathered here to discuss today is another critical move forward and upward. Madam Speaker, this bill seeks to expand the practice of nursing and midwifery, provide for the training, regulation, registration, and licensing of registered nurses, midwives, and advanced practice nurses, provide for the training and regulation of nurse interns, assistive personnel, and nursing agencies, among other improvements. The role of nurses and midwives has changed over the years, and the existing law has failed to evolve with it. For example, through this bill, we will now acknowledge and account for advanced practice nurses, as well as nurses with advanced degrees. The old Act did not acknowledge these qualifications, but with this bill, their expertise will be recognized. We will be aligning ourselves with international nursing standards and allowing for the continued professional development of nurses and midwives. Nurses are a very important part of the healthcare equation. In many ways, they are the most important part. Our Bahamian nurses are well-trained and equipped to provide the highest quality service. The US and Canada know this. That's why they're constantly recruiting our nurses with very high-paying offers to work abroad. Our nurses are in high demand, and for good reason. Look at how they skillfully manned the front lines during Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic. With the right support, they will be capable of doing even more. And through this bill, Madam Speaker, we finally have a modern legal framework that recognizes the evolution of the field and allows for growth. The new category of nurses included under this bill includes midwives, nurse anesthesists, clinical nurse specialists, and nurse practitioners. All of these roles are critical to a successful healthcare system. We already have nurses trained to do these things. Now we have a system that will recognize their experience and expertise. Under the Davis administration, these experts will no longer have to go abroad to be formally recognized. This bill allows for temporary, provisional, and special registration of nurses to allow for flexibility in expanding human resources and meeting specific needs during critical times, such as pandemics and emergencies. As I said, the Davis administration has consulted widely to bring about this comprehensive modernization of laws, regulations, and standards for nurses and midwives in the Bahamas. We ensured that we had the full support of the nursing community before moving forward, and we listened intently. We want our nurses to know how important they are to us. And it's important to demonstrate this fact, not only through our words, but through our actions. Certainly, this bill goes a long way towards showing our respect, admiration, and appreciation for our nurses. As Minister of State for the Public Service, I am proud to have played a role in taking care of our nurses. In August of 2022, the government entered into a monumental new agreement with the Bahamas Nurses Union. Headlines describe this agreement as transformative. Some would say that it is among the best agreements that the Bahamas Nurses Union has ever signed. In the Bahamas, our nurses are chronically underpaid. That is a major part of the reason we are experiencing our current brain drain. They can make more elsewhere. I won't pretend that we have enough money to compete with the US, but what I do know is that we can do a lot better. The signed industrial agreement provides across-the-board increases in benefits and compensation for thousands of nurses. The starting salary of nurses was increased from $22,000 to $26,000, with eventual movement towards $30,000 per annum. Nurses will receive a 15% increase over the next 3 years. The agreement also incorporated a $3,000 retention bonus, a $100,000 death benefit, $10 an hour in additional pay for disasters and pandemics, responsibility allowance, on-call allowance, transportation and casual mileage, sessional work, and uniform allowances, among other forms of compensation and benefits. Also, because we understand that those who care for us also need access to quality care themselves, we added dental and vision care to the nurses' insurance plans. This was a very comprehensive package that both the union and the government felt was a step in the right direction. The Labor Relations Unit at Public Service, as well as the teams of Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Public Hospital Authority, worked hard to make this agreement happen for the benefit of all nurses. Despite the government's limited fiscal situation, we all understood that there was no better way to show appreciation, not through lip service or empty platitudes, Madam Speaker, but in the way that really counts: better compensation and better benefits. So, with all we have done and that all we have left to do, the Nurses and Midwives Bill fits within our wider vision for modern nursing standards and practices within the Bahamas, inclusive of more competitive compensation. Every dollar our nurses make are well earned. They deserve even more than we can afford to give them. But this bill and the many other actions we have taken will cumulatively improve the experience of working as a nurse or midwife in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, I proudly second the Nurses and Midwives Bill. It is a step in the right direction in support of our valuable and dedicated nurses who power healthcare in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Once again, I'd like to thank Almighty God for this opportunity to return to this House and to lend my voice in support of Bahamian people in general, but certainly the people of Marco City in particular. Madam Speaker, we are here today to stand in solidarity with multiple administrations who have contributed to the drafting and consultation of this very important bill, the Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022. All of our colleagues are in full support of passing this bill, which we believe would certainly improve the standards for nurses throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and contribute to the improvement in the health system. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank all of the members of the Nurses Council, all of the members who are present here, all of the nurses throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I believe every member in this House must have multiple relatives who are nurses. I certainly do. And I'm grateful, as we are all grateful, for your continued sacrifice on our behalf, working many times in less than ideal conditions, having not been compensated properly under any administration, and often berated by members of the public when the fact is the overwhelming majority of nurses, like educators in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, are in this profession because you absolutely not merely love it, but love the Bahamian people. And like any profession, there will be those who join it because they need a paycheck. And until we grow the economy so that everybody can pursue their passion and make their passion pay their bill, there will be persons who end up in professions we would rather not have them in. But I'm grateful to have benefited from, interacted with, and here today to join my colleagues in celebrating all of you for the historical and ongoing sacrifice that you continue to make. Madam Madam Speaker, we believe that health care ought to be a bipartisan proposition for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. That we have to be awfully careful how we permit it to become a political football kicked back and forth. So, Madam Speaker, I'm going to certainly do my best to make the point that we wish to work hand in hand with the government, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, and his colleagues in improving the healthcare infrastructure and the ecosystem, because it is a matter of life and death. Sadly, Madam Speaker, we are not living in a dispensation where political tribalism has ceased, and we seem not to be able sufficiently to pause and work substantively on matters that are of common interest. This bill gives us an opportunity today to hold hands in supporting the work not done by the Minister of Health, really, or successive ministers of health. A small role was played, but by nurses and practitioners within the healthcare system who, unlike us, are not as temporary as we are. Madam Speaker, I don't want to single out anyone, but I certainly would leave from the nurses to express our gratitude for the education that we have gleaned in having a conversation with Nurse Celeste King and Patricia Newbold, persons who have consulted with stakeholders throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, as has many of the persons who are here in the gallery, and to thank Amantia Williams as well for the role that she has played, and the many nurses who have played a key role in advancing our education. And so, Madam Speaker, I agree with the member for Tall Pines, who I know of his keen interest in improving, particularly healthcare in Grand Bahama, having served as member of parliament and still a resident of our island. And I agree with him that we have to remember those persons who have given their lives on the front line, particularly during COVID, who made sacrifices. And so I still believe, Minister Davil, that there are still nurses who have not been properly compensated based on the role that they played during COVID. And one great testimony to our commitment to honor them as we improve the standards by passing this bill, one sure way of showing commitment is to go back, revisit the listing that was submitted under our administration, and where everything was not done correctly, to make sure that they're compensated. One way to honor them is for those families who are still waiting for payments for nurses who have passed away. There should be no statute of limitations on persons being paid, their families being compensated as was committed in the event that a nurse, a healthcare professional, dies on the front line. There's still persons who have been petitioning, and I've spoken with the minister, and I trust that those matters have now all been resolved. And I'm sure the minister will have an opportunity at the end of my presentation to indicate that we've taken care of all of those persons. We spent an inordinate amount of time lobbying on their behalf at the end of my presentation. Madam Speaker, this bill modernizes the legislative as well as policy framework that governs the nursing profession. And Madam Speaker, as you talk to nurses, they will tell you it's been 30 years in the making. That's why I always find it so sadly humorous when we come in here and beat up the table and beat up our chests as if we've done something incredible, when the truth is we are overdue. I believe there are cases in legislation. It would be better to be premature than overdue. But politically, we have the propensity to be overdue. And then when it finally arrives, we're naming our administration as if we have done something remarkable, when the truth of the matter is we are slow to realizing the change that people have been working for. And so, Madam Speaker, my colleagues are going to talk in greater detail about the content of this bill, but we stand with the member for Tall Pines and the member for Golden Gates as we stand with the nurses and health professionals in our country. Madam Speaker, I think I would be remiss before I turn my attention to some very critical issues impacting our country today. Madam Speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind myself, remind my colleagues, and remind all of us of some of the work that is left undone. Because we could pass this bill, but if we don't improve the infrastructure and the ecosystem, this would be a small step in the right direction, because much of what is undone, and both administrations bear responsibility, has the potential to weaken what is, I believe, a strong collaborative effort that we're engaging in today. Madam Speaker, I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to visit PMH and to do a tour. Madam Speaker, I was a bit surprised to hear the Prime Minister express alarm at what he saw when he moved through the hospital. I thought it was a national, not well-kept secret that we were in trouble at the hospital. I live in Grand Bahama. Every weekend, I attend anywhere from 1 to 4 funerals. Few things are as difficult as talking to constituents who are convinced that if we didn't have a hospital that should have been changed decades ago, that their loved one would live. So let me pick a period so that, because I know members opposite like to get touches, but let's pick under our administration. When I attended funerals then, it is difficult to talk to a constituent who is so angry that you cannot find a way to enter the conversation to reassure them that the death had very little to do with the hospital, because they are convinced that we have failed them, that what we have is a clinic on steroids rather than a state-of-the-art facility that's befitting of a cosmopolitan city, of a growing population, of an affluent country that should have the wherewithal to enter into public-private partnerships with persons who have deep pockets and a clear sense of a state-of-the-art facility that we need to put in place. We have a facility in Exuma. Took us for eternity. It straddled multiple administrations and simply could not open it properly and staff with the requisite persons. So as we celebrate this, we have to be sober about what we have left undone and dedicate ourselves to having a sense of urgency in moving this process forward. It is amazing that you would have facilities that have been, even clinics, that you start under one administration and then another one comes in, and because they have a new person to give a contract to, the monies, the scarce resources allocated is left to languish because they on a new run to produce something else. Meanwhile, the persons who need health care are adversely affected. So, Madam Speaker, we have a real crisis. We have a real crisis at hand. And so, yes, it does go so. You need to address that in your voice note in the mornings, right? To talk about the sense of urgency, that we need. Madam Speaker, that's why, Madam Speaker, you should have the minister. Madam Speaker, protect me. Protect me, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member, that's why the member for Golden Gates ought to be the substantive minister for public service. You can't have a political activist, a public activist being both chairman and minister for the public service. And so, Madam Speaker, it is important for us. It is important for us to help the public see that when you allocate pretty much close to the lion's share of the budget to the Ministry of Health, it should be reflected in infrastructure and the ecosystem. And we should make sure that private interests do not trump public interests. So we ought to be very careful how we manage the private interests that attend to healthcare, so that persons are not taking advantage of the public system to continue to benefit privately without us having balance. It's a tale of two cities when you look at our public facilities. And so we have to address this issue and address it candidly. Madam Speaker, in the fullness of time, we'll talk more about agencies that have attempted to contribute to our hospital and have often not been fully embraced in terms of receiving necessary resources to ensure that we improve our facilities. And so wherever the government can find to engage organizations that are minded to partner with us, whether it's to transform the children's ward that need to be transformed, we look forward to those kinds of partnerships so that we can improve it. When the private sector offers to help when we're in a time of crisis, we have a reasonable expectation that governments are not going to make decisions based on any kind of economic interest. They're going to make a decision on what can help the Bahamian people. So if there's a need for PPEs, let's take it. No matter who's making the contribution, if they're not a nefarious individual, etc. If the products can help our people, we need to take possession of it. And so, Madam Speaker, there is substantial overcrowding at PMH. We have to govern in a way that the people we serve can see that we are touched by their infirmities and we're making every effort to transform their condition. Because they know 9 out of 10 of us, if something goes wrong, we have the wherewithal to go elsewhere. But what about our constituents? I represent a constituency where many of the constituents need our public facilities. And so I make no apologies for saying I don't care what color the politician wear, red or yellow. It is important for us to have a sense of urgency, Madam Speaker. We are challenged as a country with tremendous shortages in critical areas like dialysis, operating theater, ICU, and the emergency department. Madam Speaker, for so many persons, there are too many delays in terms of getting critical test results back. It is a major issue. In some cases, the equipment isn't there. I know for those of us who assist, who truly use the government money to assist constituents, we're helping to pay for other facilities for them to leave, let's say in Grand Bahama, to leave the RAN because an equipment isn't there or it isn't working, to go to another facility in order to do the test. And women are most disadvantaged based on the various diagnostic tests that they require, Madam Speaker. So there has to be a sense of urgency. That's why we get angry when we see the amount of frivolous things that we are spending money on. And that's why people lack the compassion for policymakers in terms of when we say, well, the money just isn't there. Because it begs the question, where is the money? Is it in another ceremony before the event or after the event? Is it in another trip with an entourage that is entirely too large? The point is, don't grumble. If I didn't call your name, you must be guilty if you're making noise. So all I'm saying is, Madam Speaker, there are too many deficiencies within the system. And I'm not claiming any one side, Madam Speaker, could be exonerated. I'm just simply saying It is an issue of priority. And as far as I'm concerned, healthcare is a matter of life and death. We should be seeking, Madam Speaker, strategic partners. I've heard numerous persons talk about wonderful proposals that have been submitted by Johns Hopkins, by Baptist Hospital. The point is, if under one administration a proposal was made and was not embraced, this is a wonderful time for those who said a ball was dropped to now go and pursue those opportunities, because it is a matter of life and death. Madam Speaker, it is important for us to ensure that we maintain human dignity in what we do in healthcare. As wonderful as many of our nurses are in the way they deal with people who are struggling, who are hurting, who are dying, it is difficult for bedside manners to compensate for somebody who is outside to receive care. I've had ministers of the gospel call me to tell me they're about to lose their salvation and possibly their freedom when a loved one is outside in the draft with a baby because they are unable to get inside, because we, not the persons who work in hospital, because we have not made the required provisions to ensure that that state of affairs does not exist. Too many people are outside looking for appropriate service. And so I know you may not be able to relate to the kind of pain that many people are having, but we who are prepared to take responsibility as policymakers for what we have collectively failed to do. That's the we I'm talking about. I don't include career politicians in that. I'm talking about those of us who came in for a season to do a work and then dip. So Madam Speaker, the reality is that so much elective surgeries have been delayed, but the issue here about human dignity is something I believe we have to find a way as policymakers to correct. Madam Speaker, I worked with a family, and this is not uncommon to me. I mean, I'm sure other colleagues have done the same thing. That a colleague has a constituent whose child is shot. We know the child has passed. The family, as is the case when there are accidents as well, all gathered outside on the front porch. And even when the briefing is going to be given to the family about the state of the health of that particular child, today we have challenges finding a suitable location to have a consult with a grieving family. Just the immediate, the whole crew can't come inside. These are real issues. And so, Madam Speaker, as we debate the nurses and midwife bill, we have to, in my view, rededicate ourselves to addressing these vexing issues, because it is easy to slip into the routine of doing politics as usual and not remember that a segment of our population are living constantly in dire straits. And Madam Speaker, if we don't get it right, and get it right with a sense of urgency, it will get worse, and the discontent on the road, on these streets, will be worse. Because, Madam Speaker, there is an increase in chronic illnesses like hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, and other communicable and non-communicable diseases. So getting our healthcare system straight is pivotal, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, I say to colleagues opposite, we are prepared to work with you, but we will not be quiet. We will not be quiet when you're beating up your chest as if something huge is being accomplished by you without fully appreciating the collaborative effort and the collective genius of Bahamian people in ushering in these changes that we like to take credit for unilaterally. Madam Speaker, there is a need to increase health funding for repurposing budgetary funding currently directed to pet projects, Madam Speaker. Secondly, we have to resolve outstanding obligations to vendors and creditors to restore pharmaceutical and disposable supplies and ensure good working order equipment. You in the chair, let's fix it. 3, we must adjust PHA funding, allocation, and increase revenue generation to reduce or eliminate operational deficit. We shouldn't play cat and mouse with the public. Some areas we know we have to generate money for operational efficiency. This whole business of when several ministers indicate that there's a need to look at how we are going to fund things, the Prime Minister would then intervene and say, you know, because it's important to maintain the optics of having this unusual amount of compassion. I think he's a compassionate man, but there's no need to try to project additional image of being extra compassionate by interrupting sensible proposals to improve a system. And he said, no, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna bother with the electricity rate, and then come back later, aided and abetted by his colleague, and raise fuel rate by 163% because it wasn't done when it should have been dealt with. Or when the gentleman for the good member for Pinewood indicates that we are facing insolvency, and if we don't do something, and they say, oh, no, we're not going to touch that. Only now to hear, oh, it's inevitable. We have to do. And I could give you multiple lists of these interventions for political purposes to delay what is important. So the hospital obviously needs to be funded. I'm told that if you look at places like if it's Cayman or you look at Bermuda, when you look at their revenue stream in terms of how much money annually they are earning, and then you compare it to what we are earning in terms of revenue from whether it's a Princess Margaret or whether it's Saran or whether it's Sandilands, I think that that group combined may be less than $10 million. There is a need for us to have a reasonable, mature conversation with the public about what contributions we must all make if we are to get services that is befitting of our population. And so, Madam Speaker, it is important for us to outline and fund the program to supplement skilled professionals in radiography, pharmacy, physiotherapy, dentistry, and other technical areas across our health system. Madam Speaker, we have to revamp the health scholarship program to fund all areas of the health sector. Again, Madam Speaker, I believe if we put our heads together, put our hearts together, we can accomplish a great deal. Madam Speaker, there's a need to publish the timelines and budgetary allocations for ward renovations and modular additions to the health facilities. And then finally, Madam Speaker, it is important for this administration to eliminate VAT from healthcare services and medication. My colleague will talk in greater detail, Madam Speaker. Just recently, Madam Speaker, the government has sought to increase the burden on the average citizen who don't benefit, like us, from insurance. We have insurance in Parliament. If you're a minister, you have even more. But you have citizens now, because of the new decision being made by finance, and there's a series of them. As a small business, we try to make one agency almost a tax collector or a compliance agency for another. So small business persons can't get one thing done because the government say, your landlord have to then provide you with all this information. Madam Speaker, we are coming out of a pandemic. We're trying to rebound as a country. And this government has the most incredible ideas on how they are going to increase revenue and compliance while gutting some small businesses. So people are in a holding pattern because of some of the, there's another term that comes to mind. The Holy Spirit says no. Some of the nonsensible decisions that they are making. Madam Speaker, how do you now put VAT on insurance claims for struggling people? You took it off yachts, even though it was illegal to do so, because you did not come in here during the budget exercise and do it, which is the only period we know you're able to do that in law. But some wealthy folks could bring in the yachts duty free. No, listen to me. If it happened before, it's bad when they did it then, it's bad now. I don't have no problem saying that. None are exempt. And so, Madam Speaker, we have VAT on, the cost of healthcare has gone up for Bahamians as a result of ill-advised decisions by this administration. The decisions we make is about life and death. So let's save some lives. I can tell you something about men. We are not as wise in the management of our health as women. We often don't go to the hospital until something is near catastrophic. And the problem we have, Madam Speaker, is that when you now add the burden of finance to the desire not to know, a lot of people are not going to be showing up to the hospital. They can't afford it. The deductible alone for some of them who have insurance, they cannot afford it. So, Madam Speaker, we have to get it right. So, Madam Speaker, just for the last 2 minutes, let me just mention a couple of things very quickly. Madam Speaker, we have not forgotten that the Prime Minister has not yet relieved the member for Fort Charlotte of his duty, nor has he decided that he will demit office. But, Madam Speaker, I remind the public that we are going to pay over $100 million because of ill-advised decisions by this administration that then they sought to conceal. Madam Speaker, it isn't all of us will make bad decisions from time to time, but to conceal it relentlessly is inappropriate. It makes it difficult to trust the person's word going forward, Madam Speaker. And so I mean no disrespect. I'm just saying there is a convention, particularly when persons like to flaunt the rules, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member.
Conceal.
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 Why didn't you use a strong enough word?
Conceal. Let the Holy Spirit lead you on this one. Conceal. I invite the honourable member to withdraw. Yes. Yes. Please. You want to speak for me now? I object, Madam Speaker. I object to the imputation of any deliberate attempt to mislead this Parliament.
Thank you, honourable member.
Madam Speaker, it's a matter of public record. The member confessed to having been informed that had he taken the correct decision on the hedging program, that he had received information and briefing. He said in this house on his feet. On his feet. Of course he did. And then he blamed the Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker. Said they both knew, and the Minister of Finance made the decision. Madam Speaker, the member for Fort Charlotte misled the country and misled the House. No amount of moonwalking or backpedaling will rescue you. None. Madam Speaker, let me hasten to the conclusion. I have 1 minute and 11 seconds. May I complete?
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
Speaker,
yes.
At no time did I deliberately, consciously mislead this House. And if the honourable member will not withdraw, conceal.
Doing so, that you deliberately did so. That's the offense.
Yeah.
That's what you said.
Madam Speaker.
Members.
Madam Speaker, I ask that the member withdraw it. If not, that it be struck from the record.
Wrong in the charges of this. Madam Speaker, the member misled the House by indicating he was not briefed, and he said so at least 8 times in this House. 8 times in this House. And most of the members here have seen the tape. I've shared it with you. At least 8 times. So, Madam Speaker, let me move on very quickly. Secondly, Madam Speaker,
the chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
Speaker, on a point of order, I ask that be withdrawn from the record of the House.
The word conceal has been withdrawn.
Thank you. The member.
Well, in English, in English, there's something called synonyms. It just has the same meaning. You have misled the House on no less than 8 occasions on your feet. We will not forget it. We will 8 occasions. Misled. So you may brazen through it, but the public knows better. Madam Speaker, this administration only comes clean on major issues when found out. But they don't tell you up front. This administration took out a loan from Central Bank. You could call it an advance. And only fessed up only made the public fully aware after we raised the issue. It is correct. It is absolutely correct. $232 million. They were given permission to draw down on, but never reported it. Didn't do so in the budget exercise, did not do so in the debt management committee report, only did so after we raised it, and the media followed through. So, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I close simply by saying, there's one rule for this administration, and there's a different rule for the Bahamian people. They're looking to nolly cases related to anyone in their administration who is charged. They are thorough on investigations for FNMs and others, but they're not thorough for investigations for them. Not thorough. There's one rule for the New Day government and a different rule for the Bahamian people. A different rule. No, I just released it. Put whatever you wish on the record, my brother.
Honorable members.
Put whatever you wish on the record.
Lord, I'm in a good mood today. I am in a good mood today.
One rule for you all and a different rule for somebody else.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for South and Central Andros.
One rule for you and a different.
Thank you, ma'am. Honorable member, may I remind members that we are talking about the Nurses and Midwives Bill. Let's stick to script today, please, in the name of gospel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
That's why you start in executive appointment, police appointment, magistrate appointment, governor appointment, stacking the deck. Stacking the
Member, there's a member on the floor. Let's go, honorable member.
I'm once again delighted to stand in this honorable house and give a contribution to the Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022 on behalf of the great people of Mangrove Key, Central, and South Andros. Madam Speaker, before I begin my contribution, I would like to report to this honorable House that as of January 2023, we have begun our monthly community meetings for this year. Last Thursday, we were in the great historic community of Bowen Sound, where we held our meeting for the Central Andros.
Members.
See, one rule for you all and a different rule for other people.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true.
Madam Speaker, let me restate. I would like to report to this honorable House that as of January 2023, we have begun our monthly community meetings for this year.
Thank you, honorable member.
Last Thursday, we were in the great historic community of Bowen Sound, where we held our meeting for the Central Andros District. Our next scheduled meeting is for February the 21st, slated for the Mangrove Key District. Tomorrow, I shall travel to the South Andros community, where we will be holding our district spelling bee competition, and I want to congratulate all the contestants in that competition. Madam Speaker, I would also like to extend congratulations to Pastors Melanie Green from South Andros and Christopher Smith from Mangrove Key, who were installed Sunday past in Victoria Point, Mangrove Key, at the Mount Zion Baptist Church. I also wish to congratulate ministers Mrs. Johnson Roll, Mrs. Roll Sanders, and Mrs. Gibson Nottage, all of whom were ordained as ministers at the same service. Madam Speaker, our communities were not spared the spirit of death, and I would like at this time to wish condolences to all the families that have lost a loved one recently. Madam Speaker, I want to join my colleagues in thanking those that are in the gallery and in the country for their great work that they're doing as nurses. Madam Speaker, this bill is near and dear to me, as my grandmother, Mrs. Evangeline Cummings, who cared and continues to pray for me each and every day, was a nurse and showed the love and care nurses have for the rest of my family. Today, Madam Speaker, the government is pleased to present this legendary bill, as stated by the member for Tall Pines, a bill that will refine and redefine the work and practice of nursing in this country. In the past, nurses were limited to hospitals and internationally on the battlefields. Today, Madam Speaker, they are found in doctors' offices, in schools, in corporations and organizations, in homes, and in telehealth programs. Nurses live and work at the intersection of health, education, and communities. In the last 3 years, Madam Speaker, not only has the world come to understand the critical importance of health to all aspects of life, but we have also acknowledged the significant role that nurses play and continue to play in our lives. Nurses were placed in unimaginable circumstances by the recent pandemic. Therefore, the years ahead will demand a stronger, more diversified nursing workforce that is prepared to provide care and promote health and well-being in every evolving life cycle. Madam Speaker, the field and practice of nursing involves a deliberate, logical, and rational problem-solving process. It consists of patient assessment, diagnosis, planning, intervention, and evaluation, and includes cooperation from patients and their families. Nursing practice may be work experience that is direct and/or indirect patient care in clinical practice, nursing administration, education, research, or consultation in the specialty represented by their credentials. It is worth noting, Madam Speaker, that while the nursing process was developed for the care of individuals, it has since expanded to include a role in the care of families and communities. Because of these necessary and strategic advancements in the nursing field, this bill being laid by this Davis administration will remedy the gaps left by those unforeseen planning in a nurse's journey. Madam Speaker, as advancements in healthcare occur, it is fitting that we allow our laws to catch up and make room for what is to come in the field of nursing. This bill takes into account nurse aides who may assist in the healthcare field without the prerequisite courses and degrees for a registered nurse designation. This bill, Madam Speaker, also recognizes that those nurses who have decided to advance their careers by specializing in various disciplines within the field. According to the bill, the categories of the advanced practice nurses are as follows: a nurse practitioner, a nurse anesthetist, clinical nurse specialist, and also a midwife. Madam Speaker, we must recognize that those nurses who have worked in the field and gained extensive knowledge and experience without the requisite degree or certification. This New Day government acknowledges this gap, and this bill will, on a case-by-case basis, seek to reconcile this disparity. These nurses will be grandfathered into the system, allowing for a streamlined and more proficient register of nurses. Again, Madam Speaker, the future of healthcare also takes into account the evolution of nurse agencies and telehealth nursing. Madam Speaker, I wish to give my support to this bill as it directly affects the healthcare system in Andros. Currently, and in many cases on the Family Islands, there is one doctor, if there is a doctor, and many supportive nurses. This amended bill allows nurses in certain cases the ability and authority to dispense medications, to write prescriptions, and to determine the direction of care for a patient. We have heard many stories, Madam Speaker, many news stories of Family Island clinics waiting on doctors in order to advance a medical directive. Sometimes it is to the detriment of the patient. With advanced nurses being empowered to act, we can minimize the time frame of uncertainty that we so often hear about in medial cases. At this time, I feel it only fitting, Madam Speaker, to give a shout out to Nurse Ramming in South Andros, to Nurse Edgecombe in Mangrove Key, and Nurse Broleg in Central Andros and their teams for the exceptional work they are doing in all three areas. Madam Speaker, the nursing field has been overlooked for so long that it is only fitting that we pass this bill that will allow us to catch up to the modern changes and advancement among our nursing staff. We must never forget those who were on the front lines of the battlefield in 2020, 2021, 2022, and still today. It was and is the nurses. This bill is their outstanding reward and just due, Madam Speaker. It gives me great pleasure on behalf of the people of Mangrove Key, Central, and South Andros to give my support to this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central Grand Bahama.
Good day, and thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleagues, and all those watching across the length and breadth of the Bahamas. You know, they say that February is the month of love. So welcome to the month of love, and as I stand, I want to spread some love to some people that I love the most, and I have to start with my wife, who I'm sure I have to go back home too. To the great people of Central Grand Bahama, on the spread, you know, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. And you, my colleagues, spread some love to you, and most importantly, to you, our healthcare workers. I want to share some love with you, and thank you for the love that you've shown us by protecting us and this country. Madam Speaker, permit me to offer condolences to several families. The family of Linda Ballou, who's laid to rest over the weekend. Quite a bit of people dying. Dale Dane, Gretel Harvey, a former educator. The family of April Gow, who was laid to rest over the weekend. Melvinique Higgs, Drexel Taylor, Robert Kemp, Verlian Bain, and also recently found out that the aunt of the member of Kalani passed away yesterday. So we want to also express condolences to the member for Kalani on the passing of his aunt. I'm always proud to advise this honorable House once again that the world-famous Central Grand Bahama Farmers Market remains strong, and backyard farming in Grand Bahama has indeed taken off. The island is already covered in so much greenery, you know, a few more green thumbs will never hurt. We invite the entire Bahamas to join in these efforts to get into farming, grow more, and help to limit our reliance on the importation of over 90% of what we consume. The time is now. Food prices are getting higher and higher. And the only way for us to combat this is to grow our very own. That's the way of our future. Let us grow together. For us, we started off with just a small development on South Mall Drive, and that farm continues to grow and grow. And it's a very important part of our initiative in Central Grand Bahama. But we can't stop there. The work for food security for the entire Bahamas continues. Madam Speaker, permit me now to turn to the Nurses and Midwives Bill. It is no secret, colleagues, that this is a significant and pressing matter that we now discuss, and it should be given the utmost priority. And as such, the official opposition, as was stated earlier, has no objection to ensuring the country is taken care of with the only caveat being that it is done the right way. Madam Speaker, nursing professionals are at the front line of service provisions and play an important role in healthcare focus on people and communities. And as such, they should be given the level of support that is required for such an integral position in society. The Nurses and Midwives Bill seeks to overhaul the nurses and midwives regime across the entire Bahamas. It will ensure that proper training and education is indeed deployed. It will expand the capacity of the healthcare system across the country. And it will ensure a proper body is implemented to provide oversight to the professional industry that we all rely on. Madam Speaker, this is a no-brainer and should not incite too much contention. We know the challenges that currently stifles us. There's a serious lack of capacity here on New Providence and even more so on the Family Islands. We recall the way our delivery of healthcare was crippled through the COVID-19 pandemic. Those healthcare workers risked their lives and the lives of their family members for the good of our country, the Bahamas. Hundreds of nurses were quarantined and had to be taken out of the system, and some of them even lost their lives in the line of duty, and for that we are eternally grateful. It has become so much that the government had to bring in, and we are all aware of this, some 50 nurses, I believe, from Cuba. Not to mention, we had to rely on the support system from organizations like Samaritan's Purse, particularly in Grand Bahama. We are so grateful that we had the opportunity to have this external support. May I have some water, please? But you know, ain't nothing like being able to take care of our own home. That's what I believe this bill will do for the Bahamas. It will empower us with the capacity that we need to take care of our own people. We thank all those brave healthcare workers every day and all those who stood on the front line to provide a hedge of protection for the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, while capacity is one of the biggest issues we face in this industry, it is not the only one. I, the member for Central Grand Bahama, can confidently say that Bahamians are the most gifted, I'm going to say this with confidence, we are the most gifted, talented, and learned people across every single profession. If you need something done, I'll find you a Bahamian who can do it better than anyone else. And that's a matter of fact. And the world is starting to catch on. So as was stated earlier, much so that they are now looking to thief. And I say, yes, thief our workers, not thief. They're looking to thief our workers because of our qualification. You see, the lack of healthcare professionals, particularly nurses and midwives, is not only an issue in the Bahamas. The Pan-American Health Organization has advised that there is a shortage of nursing professionals in the region of the Americas. PAHO has said that the shortage is primarily attributable to the immigration of professionals to other regions. Problem we have. Different level of economic development in the countries. Precarious employment conditions, spoken to already. Human resource policies for health workers, including nurses. The lack of professional regulation, that's what we seek to do. Every year in the Bahamas, we are producing dozens of top-tiered, well-trained professionals. They are most time taught right here and then get their experience in our facilities. But once they are primed, some are often persuaded by the better opportunity being offered abroad, and of course, they take it. This must be stopped, and we must find a way to do it. We must make health care a priority in this country. This means not only ensuring our nurses are ready for the job, but once they are on the job, we are taking care of our human capital. Madam Speaker, the State of the World's Nursing Report 2020, Investing in Education, Employment, and Leadership, published by the World Health Organization, or WHO, estimates that there are 28 million nursing professionals in the world, a number that represents more than half of all healthcare professionals. The report also notes that there is a global shortage of 5.9 million nursing professionals, mainly in Africa, South Asia, and the Eastern Mediterranean, as well as in some Latin American countries. According to WHO, in order to reduce the global shortage of these professionals, it is necessary to increase national investment, increase the number of graduates in nursing, improve employment options, and retain professionals in the health system. The report also concludes that investing in nursing and midwifery professionals will not only enable improvements in the health field, but will also contribute to improving the quality of education, 1, promoting gender equality, 2, and ensuring decent work and economic growth. All these achievements are in line with WHO's Sustainable Development Goals. Madam Speaker, that's why another major implicator of this bill is the expansion of the practice of nursing and midwifery. In today's world, more women are choosing to utilize a new word that I learned in my research, using a doula or a midwife when it comes to their care during pregnancy, the delivery of their children, and the care after. The bill is simply moving in the right direction where the world is going. The process will remain the same. These midwives and doulas stay by the side of these women at home, home births, birth centers, and hospitals. They work with the pregnant women and new parents and help with the process of becoming a new mom. I believe all the Lamaze class, all the breathing exercises, all the pushing and stopping and whatever, that's the doulas and the midwives. They coach them through the process and they offer the emotional support pre, during, and after. I believe with more of this type of support in the Bahamas, not only could we see an increase in the country's birth rate, but also the level of care experienced by women who are expecting and indeed having children. You know, I went through this bill in detail and went over it again this morning. And I must say that in the delivery of this care, we must be very careful in how we manage this new industry. And I do have a concern. That's why when I look at the bill, I look at, in particular, clause 68 and 69 of the bill that provides of nurses, midwives, and nurse practitioners districts, as well as supervisors. Now, maybe the minister can answer these questions to help me understand better what these two clauses are about. The section, however, also stipulates that a nurse, midwife, or nurse practitioner assigned to a district shall reside within the limits of that district and shall not attend a case beyond the limits of the district without prior permission of the director or a person acting on behalf of the director, except in emergency situations. I think that's a problem. I see it as an issue because, y'all need to explain. I'm on my phone and I'm watching on my ring someone breaking into my house. I call 911. 911, what is your emergency? I explain to them, oh, where are you located? Oh, in South Bohemia. Sorry, you have to call Port Lucayo police station because you're in the wrong district. I see it as an issue because in this, if I'm not mistaken, it says that unless you reside in the district without the permission, you cannot attend the district. And I need clarification in the bill. And perhaps the minister will clear this up during his fight. Yeah, because right now it's a bit confusing, and I only pick up on it when I went through the bill, when I went to my final presentation. And I believe that this could be a flaw in the legislation. The clause would put restrictions on these healthcare workers by putting them in zones and then limiting their ability to work. I'm not sure that doctors are limited. Wherever there's a case, if a doctor is wherever he is, there's a case, he can attend to it without necessarily living in that area. So I believe that a nurse, no matter where they are, before the case becomes an emergency, they should be allowed to act without having to live in that district or reside in this. So these district and zone, I believe, could be an issue. So Minister and your team, I would really advise you and ask you to look at that clause again and see how we can make it better, because again, we're doing this for the first time, we want to do it right. And I see that as a potential problem. Okay, and as, of course, as we know, the Bahamas is divided. You know, we are island keys, an issue arises, you can't find a district, you can't find a supervisor, you can't find a minister to give you approval. If you attend to that patient, according to this bill, you could be fined. So let us look at that, have a second look at that and make sure that that is fixed, or it's not what I think it is. Because if it's what I think it is, it's a problem. All right? So again, Madam Speaker, while we support the bill, we want to make sure that we get it right. The last point I want to touch on is the human resource aspect of this move. When we hear stories about the bedside, sometimes, and it's not all, the minister spoke to it, bedside manner sometimes of some of the practitioners. Sometimes, you know, it leaves a lot to be desired. But we don't want to group everybody in the same categories. Someone may have a stressful day, you know, you may have bad apples in every carrot, in every barrel. So we don't want to paint everybody with the same brush, but we want to make sure that the bedside manner, when persons are in distress and they need a nurse, they see you as their hope. We want to make sure that you give them, and you have been doing that. And particularly during this month of February, the month of love, showing them much love and appreciation, and we assure that you have the ability to continue on with that. So, Madam Speaker and colleagues, Central Gun Bahama certainly stands in support of this legislation. It's going to empower our practitioners. It's going to support them. It's going to make our whole system better, make our country better. But like I said earlier, full support. But I really would love for us to go and look at clauses 68 and 69 again prior to the final resolution. Once again, Central Gun Bahama stands in support, considering the issues that I would have pointed out. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Central and South Abaco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, I am humbled to rise on behalf of Central and South Abaco to speak in support of this Nurses and Midwives Bill 2023. But before I get into my contribution, there are a few matters I would like to discuss with my fellow Abaconians while I stand here today. Last week, Wednesday, I held the South Abaco Community Meeting. I am thankful to Deputy Prime Minister Cooper, Director of Investments, Deputy Director General of Tourism, Senator Randy Roll, MP Cornish, and others who accompanied me on this development and general issues meeting for South Abaco. With nearly 200 people in attendance, it was a great success and shows my dedication to all the constituents, not just select areas, as was historically seen. Last year, many community meetings were held across the breadth of Central and South Abaco, many in conjunction with local government. I will do so again. It is important for me that I hear directly from my fellow Abaconians, and local government works alongside to do what is needed in Abaco. Abaco is rebounding and growing. 2023 is going to be a promising year for Abaco. I pledged to geographically diversify Abaco's economy, from South Abaco and Moores Island to Grand Key and Little Abaco in the north with my colleague Cornish. I can see new restaurants, new businesses, upgraded marinas complete or near completion, South Abaco investments creating a new economy in Abaco. Employment-seeking signs posted daily, ensuring a growing economy, expanding workforce, and furthering opportunities for Bahamians. I encourage Abaconians to pursue your business dreams. But we are not complete. We have many challenges, many issues still at hand. We must work as a team in Abaco to bring our island back and better than before, leaving a more secure future for our youth and the next generations. I have much in the works and that will come to fruition this year. Every action takes time and proper planning. I have been working diligently and continue to work diligently to ensure Abaco is on the road to recovery and to fix our infrastructure needs. There isn't a day that goes by that one of my colleagues do not get a phone call or an email from me pursuing what Abaco needs. You know, I was contacted recently about Cuban nationals living in one community and working on another key, which they would have to drive and take a boat every day to work, which was suspected to be working illegally. When asked if notice was given to immigration or police, the answer was no. That's why I'm calling you. No one person can do it all. It is a collective effort, a community united to act and to create a better way of life. Immigration also takes local effort. I applaud the Minister for National Security, Immigration, Public Works, and all that this administration is doing to tackle this pursuing issue, and in Abaco particularly, but it takes local effort and responsibility. Don't house them. Don't hire them if you know you are doing illegally. Everyone complains, but also hires. Illegals are not only Haitian descent. This is any person of any race or nationality here without coming in through the correct channels and without the rights to work. You know, we are blessed to have a lot of friends from abroad that come and boost a magnificent tourism industry, but there is a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. We must protect our Bahamians, particularly, for me, I'm speaking on Abaconians. If we do not hire them and they do not come, they will not come, including, and most importantly, the most lucrative positions held that should be and needs to be held by Bahamians. That's why it's not only one nationality that's coming here and taking from us. It's many. Make sure you are doing your part to fix this problem. Even if they have papers, they must have papers that are job specific, meaning their papers must be for you or your company. Work papers are not general approval, but a very job specific agreement. Posting between each other on WhatsApp or commenting on a Facebook post will not solve the issue. That have been growing for many, many years. We must stand up and take control of our future. Let us leave a better Abaco for the next generations. Again, we must do our part. Madam Speaker, Abaco-wide cleanup initiatives are at the head of this year's program. As a tourism-driven island, our streets and our waters must be aesthetically appealing to welcome our guests as our culture and people always have. Derelict vehicles left from Hurricane Dorian and before are scattered across Great Abaco and the Keys. I'm pleased to announce that a vehicle cleanup project is forthcoming. This initiative will remove derelict and damaged vehicles from across the island to give us a clean state, a clean start. Let's keep our island clean. Let's have pride where we live. Central and South Abaco, my community cleanup project will start within this month in the South, starting with the community of Sandy Point. Dumpsters will be provided and dates for the community cleanup will be announced. I hope many volunteers will join in with the workers provided to clean up the community. Let's be role models for our children by doing. Let's give our youth a clean place to live. Our youth learn by example, so let's lead them on a clean path together. Let's all get involved together. Madam Speaker, the Nurses and Midwives Bill 2023 is a long time coming, and I commend the Minister and Member of Parliament for Tall Pines for highlighting this immense need in our healthcare and recognizing those nurses and midwives that took the initiative to further education and credentials and experience along their path. Their hard work and sacrifices need to be recognized in our great nation. That so desperately needs those nurses and midwives to have the incentives to further their experience, their education, and their work at hand. Many of them returning home from abroad or returning back to the islands from the city will be able to use their skills and knowledge in their communities. These health practitioners are some of the most important members of our nation. They continually go above and beyond their duties for the benefit of Bahamians and visitors across our Bahama land. Madam Speaker, after Hurricane Dorian and any disaster of that magnitude, doctors are a high but rare commodity. Our island nurses became our lifelines more than they already are on a day-to-day basis. After Dorian, many nurses were flown in from around the nation and the world for that matter to assist those in need. Around-the-clock aid was needed, and it was all hands on deck. Our doctors cannot be everywhere and help everyone. So our nurses have always been the ones to step forward, fill those voids, and have the broad shoulders to help my fellow Bahamians. They were providing disaster care where often time is of the essence. Our island clinics became almost like wartime bunkers, and nurses tended to many physical and emotional injuries and illnesses. After a storm, more injuries surface. Once the adrenaline wears off, or from general cleanup and recovery efforts, from stitching up deep lacerations to diagnosing more severe broke bones or internal bleeding, our nurses had to prioritize cases and make priority recommendations on who was to be flown out first. I have seen firsthand how critical decisions they were making, such as with a severely ill 6-week-old newborn, or an elderly man with broken ribs and possible internal injuries or bleeding. Real decisions, life decisions. And I commend them again. They are some of the most important citizens we have in this country. Without these nurses and midwives, Abaco would not been able to provide the aid and relief that was needed post-Dorian. They saved many lives. They worked hard and tirelessly under horrific conditions. And we Abaconians are grateful. for each and every nurse that assisted us and others. There are no words to describe how grateful we are for your sacrifice. Madam Speaker, if that wasn't enough, while our nurses was just starting to see daylight from Dorian disaster, a new global threat entered our already fragile islands a mere 6 months later, the COVID pandemic. Our exhausted nurses joined the forces without hesitation and became frontline workers, working to save lives while putting their own lives at risk. With lockdowns and quarantines to constant daily COVID testing, our nurses persevered and pushed on. They knew what the job was, and they knew that we depended on them. Madam Speaker, on the Outer Keys and many family islands, our local government clinics are the lifeline of our community. With emergency situations or viruses such as COVID, time and geographic positioning are hurdles in saving lives. With over 70 clinics spread out throughout the Bahamas, our nurses' roles are expanding and continuously evolving. As mentioned in the bill, our nurses should be recognized as full partners with physicians and other medical professionals. Those nurses and midwives who further their studies and certification, for example, the practice of the advanced practice nurse and nurses with bachelor's and master's and doctoral degrees need to be recognized. We need more nurses to expand their roles, their knowledge, and request others return home with your skills and with your abilities. Madam Speaker, if you have never lived on the Keys or other small islands of the Bahamas, you wouldn't truly grasp the necessity or the roles that our local government clinics, our island doctors, nurses, and midwives play. Without a hospital, without 24/7 emergency care nearby, we count on them. We count on our local nurses and midwives to tend to their ever-expanding roles whenever a doctor is unavailable or too far away. From delivering unexpected babies, seen that firsthand, to serious and life-threatening emergency treatments, or general care and diagnosis needed for optimal health. As our local island communities, populations expand, so do the roles of our nurses and midwives. The health industry is always evolving and changing. We must adapt and keep up with modern healthcare practices. With hospitals an airplane ride away, we often need their help now, not later. With expanding the roles and creation of Bahamian advanced practice nurses, more and more nurses will be further trained to deal with these expanding and challenging roles. When a doctor cannot be available, we will have a team of nurses and midwives on the front lines, ready and able to assist, and they will be recognized. That alone brings me and my family islanders much comfort. Madam Speaker, I think of many qualified Bahamians, but a young Abaconian in particular comes to mind. An Abaconian named was Chloe. Went abroad, was lucky enough to go abroad to study nursing and is pursuing to be a nurse practitioner. She came to me concerned a few months back that upon her completion of her studies abroad, would there be a future for her in the Bahamas as a nurse practitioner? This was hard for me to hear. Young Bahamian asking, is there a place for them in our country? Thankfully, today I can say yes. And I say to this to Chloe and all Bahamians studying and practicing medicine abroad or within the Bahamas, there is a place for you. You are important and you will be recognized. This bill and this administration is promising that you and your hard work will be recognized and the evolving and expanding roles of our nurses and midwives will be acknowledged. Madam Speaker, this new bill will create an environment for new, ever-changing and modern nursing and midwifery practice throughout the Bahamas. We will now have advanced nurse practice nurses. Once certified, the nurse practitioners can effectively diagnose, treat within their scope of practice in collaboration and consultation with other medical practitioners. This gives our nurses more autonomy and uses their trained skills more effectively. This releases some of the strain on our doctors and within the Bahamas spread out over hundreds of islands and keys. This brings more access to quality health care to all Bahamians. Madam Speaker, Central and South Abaco applaud and support this Nurses and Midwives Bill 2023 and wholeheartedly support a modernized healthcare throughout the Bahamas. Myself and my fellow Abaconians also thank our many nurses and midwives throughout our nation for their sacrifice and their dedication to our people. God bless my fellow Abaconians, my fellow Bahamians, and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
I move for the suspension of the House until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Thank you, Honorable Members. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House be suspended until 3 p.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. It is agreed. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m.
All rise! That's what I say.